Imagine you are watching hundreds of billions of dollars just being poured into building like the most advanced high-voltage power grid in human history.
Right.
They are laying down copper, building these massive substations and, routing gigawatts of electricity to every corner of the globe.
Yeah.
But here is the catch, right? Half the appliances that are actually going to plug into this massive grid, well, they haven't even been invented yet.
Exactly. It's a massive high-stakes gamble on the future of compute.
Right, because we are building the infrastructure for a future that is mutating by the week, honestly.
Yeah, we are basically watching an industry simultaneously try to construct an entirely new foundational layer for the global economy while, frantically trying to figure out what happens when that power grid inevitably overloads.
Well, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are taking you right to the absolute bleeding edge of that phenomenon.
Yes, we are.
And our guide for this, the source material we're looking at today, is the Tech Reader AI Digest, compiled by Aaron Rose, and this is dated April 10th, 2026.
A really fascinating issue, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. And the mission for this deep dive is pretty ambitious, because we aren't just doing a rundown of random tech updates.
No, we're going way deeper.
Exactly. We are tracing the complete anatomy of the artificial intelligence boom top to bottom as captured in a single 24-hour news cycle.
Right. So we are going to track the actual physical silicon being forged in the foundries, and then, the billions in debt being raised to network those chips together in the cloud.
Yeah.
And then moving up to the agentic software architectures running on top of them. And finally, the really severe legal reckoning that occurs when these theoretical systems collide with actual human behavior.
Okay, let's unpack this because, the contrast between the astronomical, unbridled financial growth of this infrastructure and the massive real-world guardrails currently being tested in the courts is just staggering.
It really is.
So before artificial intelligence can execute a single line of code, it needs a physical substrate, right? It needs silicon. So we have to start at the foundries, TSMC.
Yeah, TSMC. And this is where the raw financial data tells a story that completely defies the broader market sentiment right now.
Well, let me jump in on that sentiment, actually, because if you spend 5 minutes on tech forums or read the macro analyst notes right now, there is this pervasive narrative about an AI infrastructure slowdown.
Oh, sure, the hardware winter narrative.
Right. The argument is that the massive capital expenditure cycles from the hyperscalers have peaked. The bubble is deflating, and we are entering a hardware winter. But you're saying the numbers tell a different story. Wait, I keep hearing about an AI infrastructure slowdown. Is that actually happening?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the actual foundry data just obliterates that slowdown narrative. We just got TSMC's Q1 2026 numbers, and they are nothing short of historic.
Okay, hit me with the numbers.
So revenue hit 1.134 trillion new Taiwan dollars.
Wait, trillion?
Yeah, trillion, which translates to roughly 35.7 billion US dollars.
Wow, in 1 quarter.
In 1 quarter. And that is a 35.1% year-over-year increase. Plus, March specifically was their strongest single month on record, up 45.2%.
Well, wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
Aren't foundry revenues inherently a lagging indicator? If TSMC is printing $35 billion in a quarter, aren't we just looking at the fulfillment of orders that, OpenAI and Meta placed 18 months ago during the height of the hype cycle?
Right.
So how does that prove future demand isn't cooling off?
See, that is the exact right question to ask, and the digest provides the answer through the lens of semi-analysis analyst Shravan Kundajala.
Okay.
He digs into the actual node distribution. It isn't just that TSMC is making more chips, it's what they are making and, crucially, the pricing power they command.
The advanced nodes.
Exactly.
Wow.
The advanced nodes, specifically the 7-nanometer and smaller architectures, they now make up 77% of TSMC's total wafer revenue.
Oh, wow. So they aren't padding these numbers with, commodity silicon for automotive dashboards or IoT devices or whatever.
No, not at all.
77% of the revenue is coming purely from the microscopic bleeding-edge architectures required specifically to run high-bandwidth memory for AI accelerators.
Yes. And here is the forward-looking signal that just destroys that lagging indicator argument.
Let's hear it.
Kundajala notes that TSMC successfully pushed through really aggressive price increases on these leading-edge nodes for the upcoming cycles. And he forecasts their gross margins will hit 64%.
Wait, 64% gross margin on physical hardware manufacturing?
Yeah.
That completely defies the laws of hardware economics. I mean, usually hardware is a race to the bottom as fabrication becomes commoditized.
Right, but TSMC essentially has a monopoly on physics right now.
Yeah.
So they can basically dictate terms to the entire planet.
Which means the bottleneck shifts, right? So
Yeah.
TSMC is printing the chips at a record pace. Who is buying them all up and renting them out?
Well, that brings us directly to the most aggressive land grab in the cloud sector right now, which is CoreWeave.
CoreWeave, yeah.
Over a historic 48-hour window, CoreWeave fundamentally reshaped the AI infrastructure layer.
They had a crazy week.
Insane week. They announced a $21 billion expansion with Meta through 2032.
Okay, so bringing their total infrastructure relationship with Meta to roughly $35 billion.
Exactly.
Just for context for you listening, that means Meta is committing the equivalent of the GDP of a small European nation to a single cloud provider just to secure future compute.
Yeah, it's wild. And exactly 24 hours later, CoreWeave locked in Anthropic, who signed a multi-year deal to power the Claude models. But the key architectural detail here is that CoreWeave is giving Anthropic early deployments of NVIDIA's Vera Rubin platform.
Oh, the new architecture.
Right. This isn't legacy Hopper compute. This is the absolute bleeding edge next generation stuff. And the market reacted instantly. CoreWeave's stock jumped 10.87%, hitting $102.
But, I mean, capturing this much of the market requires an insane amount of upfront capital, which explains the other half of CoreWeave's week. They're raising $3.5 billion in convertible debt to finance all this.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, issuing convertible debt right now is really a strategic masterstroke.
How so?
Well, CoreWeave is operating at a massive burn rate to secure these TSMC chips and build the data centers.
Yeah.
But by issuing convertible debt, investors are essentially accepting lower interest payments now for the option to convert to equity later.
Right.
It signals immense institutional confidence that CoreWeave isn't just a temporary vendor. They are transitioning into a permanent shared utility layer.
The shared power grid. I mean, you look at their client roster now, Anthropic, Meta, Mistral, OpenAI. 9 of the top 10 AI model providers globally are running on CoreWeave.
Yep.
The only major holdout is Elon Musk's xAI, which is keeping Grok 5 on proprietary clusters for reasons we will actually touch on later. But by hoarding these clients, CoreWeave basically solves their biggest existential threat.
Which was their massive reliance on Microsoft.
Exactly. They previously had a 67% revenue reliance on Microsoft.
Right. They've successfully decoupled their fate from a single hyperscaler and made themselves the indispensable bedrock of the entire ecosystem.
And CoreWeave isn't taking on billions in convertible debt on a gamble. They are doing it because the fundamental nature of compute is changing this week. We're moving from the physical foundation up to the software layer.
Yes, the action layer.
Because for the last few years, we've thought of AI as essentially a high-powered search engine, right?
Yeah.
You ask a chatbot a question, it predicts the next token, and it gives you an answer. It's an isolated transaction.
Right, a passive transaction.
But that architecture is dead. Here's where it gets really interesting. The industry is aggressively pivoting to agentic AI.
Yeah, the architectural shift from passive generation to active execution.
Yes.
A standard model just waits for your prompt.
Yeah.
But an agentic model maintains continuous background loops. It interfaces with external APIs, makes autonomous decisions, and actually alters the state of software. It does the actual work.
Right. And I have to ask, is anyone actually making real money on this agent shift yet? Because the financial proof that this architecture is viable is, well, it's finally hitting the balance sheets.
Oh, absolutely. The digest highlights Perplexity's numbers for March, and their annual recurring revenue hit $450 million.
Wow, $450 million.
Yeah, a 50% jump in a single month.
Which is an absurd growth curve for an established platform.
Yeah.
And the catalyst wasn't a better search algorithm, was it?
No. It was specifically their pivot to their computer product, true agentic workflows, combined with usage-based pricing.
Okay, usage-based pricing, let's talk about that.
The pricing model shift is critical to understand here. Traditional SaaS relies on flat-rate monthly subscriptions.
Right, like paying $20 a month.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when an AI agent is executing multi-step tasks, say, scraping 50 websites, synthesizing the data, and writing it to a database, it is burning compute continuously until the task is resolved.
Okay.
So usage-based pricing aligns the revenue directly with the compute intensity of the agents. With over 100 million monthly active users now triggering these high compute workflows, Perplexity's revenue is just going parabolic.
That makes total sense. And Anthropic is attacking the exact same opportunity, but from the infrastructure side for developers. They just pushed Claude-managed agents into public beta.
Yes.
And the technical problem they are solving here is massive. Because if you've ever tried to build a multi-step AI agent from scratch, you know it is an absolute nightmare of state management.
Oh, yeah. State management in stateless HTTP architectures is incredibly difficult.
Right.
If you want an agent to complete a 10-step workflow, it needs perfect memory. Yeah. It needs to remember what happened in step 2 to successfully execute step 8.
Exactly.
Historically, developers had to build these complex Redis clusters and external vector databases just to give the agent a localized memory.
Not to mention the sandboxing right. If you are giving a language model permission to execute code in your system, you have to build isolated environments so a hallucination doesn't accidentally, drop your entire production database.
Exactly.
But Anthropic is now abstracting all of that friction. For the standard token rate plus $0.08 per session hour, they basically handle the state management, the sandboxing, and the error recovery natively.
And it allows enterprise teams to focus purely on the logic of the agent rather than the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Early beta testers, companies like Notion, Rakuten, Asana, they're reporting up to a 10-point improvement in task success rates.
Yeah.
I mean, they are moving from prototype to production in days instead of quarters.
That's huge. And to really grasp how this agentic shift is altering the internet, just look at what Shopify just rolled out. I kind of compare this to the early days of e-commerce.
How so?
Well, think back to the early 2000s. Setting up an e-commerce backend with payment, gateways, and database schemas, it used to require a dedicated engineering team.
Right, it was super complex.
And Shopify came along and standardized the entire stack. Well, they're doing it again, but this time they are standardizing the translation layer for AI. They just launched an official AI toolkit built on an MCP server.
Ah, the Model Context Protocol.
Hmm.
This is a really profound architectural integration.
It really is. MCP essentially creates a standardized, secure bridge between a language model and a raw local system. The Shopify MCP server natively supports Claude Code, Cursor, Codex, and Gemini CLI.
And what this means in practice is that a merchant doesn't need to manually click through a graphic interface to manage their store anymore.
No.
The agent can interface directly with the Shopify backend schema using just natural language.
Exactly. You literally open your terminal and type, analyze yesterday's cart abandonment data, identify the 3 lowest converting products, and apply a 15% discount code to them across the store.
Right.
And the agent translates that natural language into the necessary API calls, validates the schema, and executes the changes in real time. It is true autonomous task execution.
Yeah. And while this transition to the action layer dominates the high end of the market, I should mention the digest nodes, the rest of the foundational model ecosystem is maintaining a pretty steady cadence.
Just churning along.
Right. DeepSeek V4 is targeted for a mid to late April release. Alibaba's Qwen and Mistral's open-weights models are holding steady, and Google is continuing its rollout of Gemini NotebookLM integrations.
Okay, but here is the big friction point. These highly autonomous agents, capable of interacting directly with databases and taking real-world actions, well, they are trained on vast, near unfathomable data sets of human behavior.
Yes.
Data acquisition is now its own multi-billion-dollar sub-industry. Look at the News Corp and Meta deal.
Right, that's a $150 million deal over 5 years.
Yeah.
Meta is basically licensing content from the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, and other News Corp properties strictly for model training.
And Robert Thompson, the CEO of News Corp, isn't pretending this is about traditional readership anymore. He explicitly referred to their journalism as a valuable input. They are even launching NewsGPT internally. News is no longer just a product for human consumption. It is raw caloric fuel for language models.
Exactly. So what does this all mean? We have ungodly amounts of physical compute, models trained on the entirety of human media, and software architectures designed to take autonomous actions in the wild. This brings us to the inevitable collision with reality.
Right, the legal and societal reckoning. So what does this all mean when the outputs of these massive systems go terribly wrong in the real world? Because when these systems break or when they are weaponized, the fallout isn't contained to a server rack.
No, it is not.
And the most critical and frankly sobering piece of reporting in today's digest deals with this exact intersection. Let me be very clear up front. We are examining this strictly as a matter of legal precedent, legal exposure, and corporate governance. We are impartially reporting the facts from the source material to inform you, the listener, without taking any political sides.
Right. We are looking at the ongoing investigation in Florida, and it is crucial we examine this through that objective lens of liability and governance.
Exactly.
This raises an important question about legal frameworks, because Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier has formally opened an investigation into OpenAI.
And this is regarding the role ChatGPT allegedly played in the April 2025 Florida State University mass shooting,
Right.
which, as we know, resulted in 2 deaths and 6 injuries. So let's lay out the facts as Aaron Ward's reported them in the digest.
Well, the technical evidence at the center of this investigation is what will define AI liability for the next decade.
Yeah.
The court documents indicate that the accused shooter, Phoenix Eichner, interacted with the model extensively. I mean, he entered over 200 prompts into ChatGPT leading up to the attack.
And the nature of those prompts goes far beyond general inquiries, doesn't it?
Absolutely. He was asking for tactical advice, requesting predictive modeling on how the local police and the broader country would respond to a shooting at FSU.
Unbelievable.
He was asking for specific times when the student union was most crowded and deeply technical questions about how to make his specific weapon operational.
And this raises a legal concept that is just totally uncharted right now. This case is shaping up to be the first definitive duty of care test for generative AI labs.
Yes, the duty of care test.
Let's break down that legal standard. Duty of care essentially measures foreseeability. Like, if a car manufacturer knows the brakes on a specific model will fail at high speeds and they sell it anyway, they have breached their duty of care because the harm is entirely foreseeable.
Right.
But applying that standard to generative logic is incredibly messy.
It is incredibly messy because language models are not deterministic. I mean, a search engine just points you to a web page that already exists. But ChatGPT was actively generating customized tactical responses.
Right. It was creating new, specific information.
Exactly. So the legal friction comes down to this.
Okay.
If a user inputs 200 escalating prompts seeking advice on a tactical assault, does the system's failure to flag, halt, or report that interaction constitute a breach of duty?
Especially when OpenAI's defense will likely argue that building a safety filter aggressive enough to catch this might also flag, say, a thriller novelist researching a plot point.
Right.
The technical challenge of distinguishing intent in natural language is exactly what is colliding with the legal standard of foreseeability here.
And Attorney General Uthmeier stated subpoenas are forthcoming. OpenAI has publicly stated it will cooperate. And crucially, attorneys representing the victims' families have announced their intention to pursue civil litigation against the company.
Which really forces us to look at the compounded corporate risk OpenAI is carrying right now, because this investigation is not happening in a vacuum.
No, the sheer scale of their legal exposure is mounting at the worst possible time for them.
Exactly. They have the Florida duty of care test, they have an incoming wave of civil suits, and the massive, highly publicized Musk versus OpenAI trial begins in exactly 17 days.
Which, incidentally, is the exact reason XAI and Grok 5 remain completely isolated from that CoreWeave infrastructure ecosystem we analyzed earlier. Musk is quarantining his models from any shared utility layer that might be entangled with OpenAI's ongoing legal warfare.
That makes a lot of sense. And OpenAI is trying to navigate this legal minefield while simultaneously targeting a Q4 initial public offering.
Yeah, talk about bad timing.
Right. They are trying to convince Wall Street to buy into their multi-hundred-billion-dollar valuation while actively testing the absolute limits of corporate liability.
And as the digest points out, this is a material governance and reputational risk that cannot be papered over by ARR growth. I mean, you cannot out-earn a fundamental reclassification of software liability.
No, you really can't.
If the courts rule that AI labs hold a strict duty of care over the outputs their agents generate, the entire economic model of the industry has to be repriced to account for that legal exposure.
And you can actually see the rest of the ecosystem quietly panicking and bracing for impact. The digest caught a very subtle move by Microsoft this week.
Oh, the terms of service update.
Yeah. They have a pending revision to the terms of use for Microsoft Copilot, shifting the classification of the tool strictly to entertainment only.
It is the ultimate legal firewall. I mean, applying an entertainment-only label to enterprise-grade software that is deeply integrated into Fortune 500 workflows,
Yeah.
that is a glaring admission of vulnerability.
Completely.
They are preemptively trying to construct a defense that their output shouldn't be relied upon for critical, real-world execution.
It's the equivalent of slapping a "for novelty use only" sticker on a highly autonomous piece of software. It shows you exactly how terrified the incumbent tech giants are of the legal storm currently gathering over OpenAI.
It's pretty wild. We've watched the narrative today shift from the physical constraints of silicon to the boundless potential of autonomous agents straight into the severe constraints of human law.
It really is the complete anatomy of an industry moving at terminal velocity. I mean, just to summarize for you listening, we started deep in the foundries today, looking at TSMC locking in 64% margins on the microscopic architectures required for AI memory.
Yeah.
Then we saw CoreWeave leverage billions in convertible debt to capture the utility layer and become the indispensable power grid for Meta and Anthropic.
Yeah.
We moved up to the software layer, tracking how usage-based pricing and standardized state management are turning models into high-revenue autonomous agents via tools like Shopify's MCP integration.
Exactly.
And we ended by looking at the stark reality of the Florida AG investigation, testing the legal concept of duty of care against OpenAI.
I want to leave you, the listener, with one final unresolved thought that kind of builds on everything we've analyzed today.
Okay, let's hear it.
We're watching AI models rapidly evolve into autonomous agents that take direct action in the real world, like with Shopify. And at the exact same time, we're watching infrastructure providers like CoreWeave consolidate their position as the essential shared power grid for these models.
Right.
So if an autonomous agent inevitably causes catastrophic, tangible harm, and the legal system determines a breach of duty occurred, where does the liability actually stop?
That is a great question.
Will we eventually see these hardware compute providers, the companies simply hosting the models, regulated exactly like public power companies or telecommunications networks under Title II style frameworks?
Wow. That is a fascinating systemic question. If the models are the appliances causing the fire, does the government eventually step in and regulate the power grid that supplied the electricity?
Exactly.
Well, as you go about your day, keep questioning the digital infrastructure being built up around you. Look past the chatbots and start looking at the silicon, the debt, and the legal frameworks quietly reshaping the internet. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.